Hey everybody, my name is Liam Burton, and for my project, I was given the opportunity to take the game that we made in class and kind of research it and figure out would it succeed in the gaming industry today. So the idea that we made as a group was called The Legend of Chubb. Just kind of backstory: it's an action RPG game with a little bit of free roam. That kind of gives you the taste of like newer style gaming, but throwing it back, and we kind of based it a lot around the Legend of Zelda series. So, kind of the whole way that I went off on this project was I took the game obviously, and I kind of built upon what we made. I researched a lot on how games succeed in the market and what makes them succeed and what makes them fail. And then I kind of did my own testing to see like would it succeed, yes or no, in the competitive environment that is the gaming industry. So before you can kind of get into the gaming industry based off of your own idea, your topic, you have to know who are the main competitors and who are like the top dogs in the market. So the three biggest, you have Tencent, you have Sony, and you have Activision Blizzard. So Tencent, just kind of going on background for all these companies, Tencent's Chinese conglomerate from 1998. They acquired Riot Games in 2015, which they created the biggest game on the face of the planet right now, which is League of Legends. A lot of different streaming websites, you can look at them. You have over 100,000 people playing it pretty much every day. They have a lot of esports competitions for League of Legends that have millions and millions of dollars of payout prizes. So it really is like the biggest player-based game, and most people know it. So next would be Sony. Obviously, Sony is a big entertainment company. They do a lot with technology, with TVs. I know they have some phones, speakers, and music. But the biggest thing, they have the PlayStation. So they own the rights to the PlayStations. They created PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4. They partner with all these other big companies, and they own a few gaming companies that kind of boost them up into the marketplace, really above their competitor, which is Microsoft. They have the Xbox. Then you have Activision Blizzard. So Activision Blizzard, it's two separate companies. So Activision was founded in 1979, and then in 2008 they had a merger with Blizzard Entertainment to become the second biggest video game company in the world right now. One of the bigger games that they created, Blizzard Entertainment, before the merger, put in place the idea for the game Overwatch, which is a pretty big game now. That came out afterwards, after the merger with Activision, and Activision kind of helped them push that game along. So coming back towards the reason for the project, which is figuring out if my game would work, doing all the research, you have 4 to 5 really big key components to making a game. The first one being replay value, and then you have the story or the campaign. So a story-driven game, and then like free roam aspects to add on to obviously the replay value. You have art style, which is a really big thing that not many people think about, and then you have fluid control systems and soundtrack. So those are the 5 really big key points that you want to kind of hone in on when you're making a game, because without those 5, or even without one of them, if you have 4 of them and not one of them, you're kind of limiting how successful you can be. So the first one is replay value. Definition of replay value: the quality or fact of being suitable for or worth playing more than once. So pretty much when you buy a game, so for instance, this is an old game, but take Super Mario. You continuously play it over and over again. You're not going to sit down once and play that game once and never play it again, because it has that replay value. It has the enjoyment to be able to play more and more, play over and over again. It has that style. It has the control system. It has the soundtrack. Everybody knows the soundtrack for Mario, and it's a common game that you can play. It's really simple. I mean, it's a side-scroller game, but everybody loves it because it has that high ceiling replay value. Another big thing about replay value is if you don't have that high ceiling, you're limiting your potential customers and your potential player base. So when you go out and buy a game, or if anybody goes out and buy a game, Normal average price for a game now is $60 or up. Are you going to spend $60 and play a game once? I know I can't really interact with people, but still asking a question. Are you going to go out and pay $60 or more for a video game that you're never going to play more than once? No. Nobody else would either. That's a lot of money, even if it's still a $30 game. Because Nintendo does $30 games, or on the computer you can buy a $10 game or a $5 game, but you're only going to play it once. You're only going to play that game through once. Nobody's going to do that. So you're limiting how many people will buy your game. Another big thing that kind of boosts your replay ceiling is DLC, or downloadable content. So downloadable content is adding on extra missions or an extra storyline or extra characters to that base game, and that gives you a higher ceiling for your game for their replay value. So when you put out a DLC, whether it's paid or it's free, people are going to come back to your game. For an example, off the top of my head, you have a game, it's called Destiny 2. That game had a base storyline, quests, replay, free roam for the replay value ceiling, and it had multiplayer. But a lot of the player base dropped off because after you beat that first story, there was nothing else to do. It was just a repetitive back and forth, get an item, now you gotta get another item, now you have to get another item in the game. So a lot of people dropped off. Then they released a DLC that added a whole new storyline and all new game modes, and most of the player base that left came back to that game. So that's how downloadable content helps. The next key point would be storyline. So storyline, it's different from replay value. Replay value is kind of the key factor in doing this research that I found, but the rest of them just help boost that replay value. So storyline, everybody knows what a storyline is, whether it comes in a movie, a book, it's all the same when it comes to a video game. A storyline is a set story that kind of tells you what that game is about. It kind of brings you into that atmosphere and that life of that character you're playing as. So storyline can just be the simple quest systems that they have in the game, or if it's interactions with NPCs, which are non-player controlled characters, even if it's just a free roam map. One of the biggest games that has ever been released, actually, Grand Theft Auto. So Grand Theft Auto, particularly Grand Theft Auto 4, when it first released in 2008, April 28th, if I'm not mistaken, it released and it had $310 million in sales on the first day of release, and in the first week, it reached over $500 million in sales. And for people that don't know what Grand Theft Auto is, it is a quest story-driven game that has free roam in a map wherever you are, and you can do whatever you want. And that's a big thing for people. If you have the ability to explore and adventure off wherever you want to go in that game, that'll help the storyline, because you get to see things that you wouldn't see if it's only the quest system that you can do. And it kind of boosts, again, that replay value. That I know I've played Grand Theft Auto, and you're able to drive around any car you want just through the streets of the city that you're playing in, and that's fun to me. So I continuously come back and play that game because I enjoy that aspect of the free roam capability. Another thing that games kind of kind of put out for you is what they call Easter eggs or secrets. So you might have little bits and pieces of a map that kind of pay homage to a certain developer of the game or a different game that company may have made. And a lot of people want to find that because it's not told to you specifically in the game or by anybody else. It's something that you find by yourself, and that gives you that excitement that you would find even in real life. A lot of people do it without video games by exploring abandoned places. So it's another thing. It's that excitement that you get when you find something that nobody else has seen before. So that's another thing that they do. And then again, DLC. You can add a whole storyline, a whole separate storyline from the main story and the main campaign through a DLC. So off of storyline, you have art style. Art style is big. It's not something that a lot of people think about right off the bat, but some people do. Art style really does come into play a large amount. When you look at games like Super Mario Brothers, that's an indie cartoon. The old ones are 8-bit. It's that colorful, bright art style. It wouldn't be the same if it was realistic, if it was 3D, if it had the graphics and the intense 4K display that we have now. It would not be the same game. It would be a whole different feel, and that is based off of art style. You look at the game Legend of Zelda. That wouldn't be the same if it was a realistic art style either. That's cartoonic. One of the bigger games that is really focused on art style is The Binding of Isaac and The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. So those two games, they were voted on Steam 250 for the highest replay value games on Steam, which is an online platform that you can buy and play games for the computer. They were voted by, I think it was over 25,000 people on that play on Steam for having the highest replay value. And one of the big components of that game is that art style. A lot of people came back because they loved that art style. It was a fun game, but that art style helped them enjoy it more because it was just an interesting concept to them that they've never seen. It's a game and an art style that was really never implemented in video games until that point. So that's another big point. The colors really kind of add a lot to it because you don't want to look at a game that's dull and gray. You want something that's colorful and visually appealing to you because it's going to make you play that game more. It's going to make you enjoy it more. Going off with art style as well, you have the controls and you have the soundtrack especially. So soundtrack and art style go hand in hand. So for instance, again, The Legend of Zelda. I have a little clip of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is kind of what we based our game off of in the class. I have the clip of the title intro. So I will play that, and it kind of gives you this, it's a very calming but also powerful kind of soundtrack that when you're playing this game with bright, colorful visuals and a little bit of a cartoonic style, and then you have this type of music, it really immerses you into that game. And it's a whole different experience than you just sitting at the computer or in front of your console with your controller and just staring at the screen. You really feel a part of that game because of the art style, and more importantly, because of a beautiful soundtrack like this. It's calming, but it's also powerful, and that's what a lot of games kind of hone in on. Probably one of the most famous soundtracks that I think a lot of people would know about is Halo. So especially Halo 3, everybody knows the meme videos that you see of people singing the song in the bathroom because of the reverb. That soundtrack goes a long way. A lot of people, you can play one specific note and they would know the game. But it doesn't also have to be just games. TV shows do it all the time. I mean, if I say this, "Are you ready, kids?" everybody's going to know that's SpongeBob. There's so many different sayings, there's lyrics, there's one specific note. I bet half of you would know a single song based off of the first 5 notes in the beginning of the song. So that soundtrack really goes a long way with making that name for that game and making it a staple point for people, whether it's nostalgia or if your top queue on Spotify or Apple Music, you continue to listen to that soundtrack and brings you back to that game every time. And the final thing, a control scheme. So if you're playing on a controller, this is supposed to be made for comfort. So when you hold it, you're in a comfortable position. If the analog sticks were down here and you're playing like this, you're not going to want to play that game because it's not comfortable. Or if you're playing a game with bad controls, like a bad control mapping, you're not going to enjoy that game because it makes it impossible for you to understand that control scheme and for you to be fluid with it. Nobody wants to play a game that they can't understand the controls, because then you can't play the game the way that you want to play it or the way that the game was meant to be played. So control scheme really goes a long way, but not a lot of people think about it. Nobody really thinks when you pick up a game and you start enjoying it, hey, that's a really good control scheme. No, nobody thinks about that. They think about the graphics, they think about the way that it performs, they think about the storyline, they think about that replay value again. Nobody thinks about that control scheme. But it really goes a long way. It's one of those backdoor or backstage kind of factors that you don't really think about, but you really have to. So kind of taking all that into consideration, I kind of did a little bit of testing, and I asked some people that I knew, and I put out the idea and everything, and I gave them. I wrote up my own control mappings and everything, and ran some tests through Excel and everything, and I found out that with everything that I researched, it came up to about 82% success. And that goes a long way simply because I focused a lot on the replay value aspect of the game, adding in different content that would bring you back to that game. So I really end off with, if you have any other questions, you can ask me, but would you play a game that continuously adds more and more content if you continuously come back to that game? I leave that up to you guys. Thank you guys for listening. And if you have any questions, again, I'm happy to answer them.